Tonight on Primetime Politics, stepping aside.
She's an extraordinary person, and if Minister Freeland wants to serve in that capacity, I think she would do a wonderful job.
Chrystia Freeland announces her departure from cabinet, taking on a new role focused on rebuilding Ukraine. Coming up, we'll speak to Liberal insider Michele Cadario about Freeland's move and the vacancy it creates for the Carney government. Also,
what is good for one province, like my province of Saskatchewan, is also often very much by extension good for Canada.
Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe on his meeting today with the Prime Minister. Is Ottawa willing to end its tariff on Chinese EVs to help Saskatchewan farmers? We'll ask the question. And
we believe that BC will be the economic engine for the country.
But is British Columbia willing to change its mind on pipelines for the sake of the national economy? We'll speak with BC's Minister for Jobs and Economic Growth. This is Primetime Politics. Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Serapio. Well, we will get to those stories in a moment. But first, we now have a day Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne rising in the House this afternoon to share there will be a budget. Not in October, but in November.
We're going to present a great budget in this House on the 4th of November, Mr. Speaker. This is going to be a generational investment in our future. We're going to build this country, Mr. Speaker.
Now, this will be the Carney government's first budget, also the first budget for Champagne. Today's announcement coming just hours after the parliamentary budget officer appeared before a Commons committee and expressed concerns about the government's fiscal anchors. Now, CPAC will have full coverage of the federal budget, and of course, we will track consultations in the days and weeks to come. Well, to the other top stories of today. For 10 years, Chrystia Freeland has had a seat at the centre of Canadian democracy. First elected in 2013, by 2015, when the Liberals were returned to power, she was asked by Justin Trudeau to serve as his first Minister for International Trade. Freeland would go on to serve as Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister, Finance Minister and Deputy Prime Minister, most recently serving as Transport Minister in the Carney government. But now Freeland is leaving, taking on a new role as Canada's new special representative for the reconstruction of Ukraine. Well, Michele Cadario is Executive Vice President for Rubicon Strategy. She served as Deputy Chief of Staff to Prime Minister Paul Martin, also to former BC Premier Christy Clark. She joins us right now to talk about this development. Michele, nice to see you. Thanks for being here.
Happy to be here. So
Minister Freeland, she is now stepping down from cabinet, taking on this new role, but reportedly still a member of Parliament for the riding of University Rosedale in Toronto. How is this going to work out, or is this just part of the transition, do you think?
Well, it's not unusual that different members of Parliament take on different positions and have different responsibilities. So, I think it's yet to be determined what exactly is entailed with this job. But certainly, whether you're a parliamentary secretary or you have a special interest in a certain file, I think that the Prime Minister just wants her to be more hands-on on this one. I think that she's been clear that she's not running again. So that certainly signals something. But she's also, an incredibly knowledgeable person about Ukraine. And probably someone who, with a lot of focused effort, given the amount of resources and support that Canada has already provided, but is yet to provide as well with that most recent announcement. I think that she's in there to kind of hope to facilitate that and do what she can with respect to the very unique circumstances that we're under.
Mm-hmm. Now, of course, it has been rumored for weeks that Prime Minister Carney was looking to shift his cabinet to bring in other players. And, to the point you just made, Chrystia Freeland does have influence with the party, and presumably she would only leave cabinet for a role that she found appropriate. Talk to us a bit more about how this role in particular, reconstruction of Ukraine, lines up for her personally and professionally.
Well, I think that she's spent a lot of her career. Obviously, she's has a Ukrainian heritage, So that is very meaningful. She's also been foreign affairs minister. She's lived abroad. She's before entering politics, she was a celebrated journalist, a prolific writer. She's someone who has been around many tables through government for quite a long period of time. I don't think anyone could suggest that Ukraine is not a challenge. And I think that there's an importance in terms of aligning the roles and the resources that Canada's putting forward to what actually are the needs on the ground. We haven't heard a lot about what is involved with this role. For a lot of these things, it can kind of be shaped to your actual talents and your knowledge, and you kind of make of it what you will. But this prime minister is also, he's someone who always seems to he does things very deliberately. And I don't expect that he just kind of made this roll up from scratch as something to give to Chrystia. I think that, perhaps seeing a need and perhaps, knowing that maybe Chrystia had told him privately, perhaps, that she wasn't going to run again. I don't know that. But that he kind of saw that this might be a good marriage in terms of giving her a substantive role, but not in cabinet.
Good marriage, as you say, and we're going to have to, as you suggest there, see how it actually evolves. But talk to us a bit more right now about Chrystia Freeland's legacy, because she's been in Ottawa for a dozen years now, has held some very senior roles. Talk to us about what her legacy will be, not only as a cabinet minister, but a woman in politics.
Well, I don't think anyone should discount how tough it is to be a woman in politics. And she was the first female first female finance minister in our country's history, and she will always hold that title. She finally broke that glass ceiling, and there's yet to be someone to actually get to that level as she has. And I think that throughout the time that she was there was a lot of change in Canada. Certainly there was, some really interesting kind of times and some kind of unique times as well. She's run to be leader and to be prime minister in her short time in public life. But I think that, she's still a relatively young woman. She has a long career ahead of her. And I suspect that she's not going to leave she might be leaving politics, but I'm not sure that she, at the end of whenever the next election is, that will be the last of her. I think that she still has a public profile that will continue on past that. I believe she said she wants to do more writing. And I'm sure that she has many things in mind that probably requires a lot more time than is allotted to her as a minister in a government right now.
Mm-hmm. Now, listen, I don't know how much of a challenge it will be for Prime Minister Carney, considering that University of Rosedale is a fairly safe Liberal seat. So rather than a challenge, let's talk about opportunity. What kind of opportunity does this open up for Mark Carney?
Well, nothing until the next election, but it is it's a great riding. And so that is always an opportunity when you have something like that available to attract a top shelf candidate. I would hope that he goes out and tries to recruit more women and more, women of profile into his government. I think that it's important love to be able to see that. But it gives a lot of options. But I don't think that that's happening anytime soon, is what I would also say. I'm one of those who believes this minority government is going to last quite a while, and it may very well last to the 4-year mark.
Okay, well, we watch, and until then, we'll call you again. But right now, Michele, thank you for this. Appreciate the time.
Happy to see you.
Well, late this afternoon, the Conservative leader did share his thoughts on Chrystia Freeland's departure from cabinet. Take a listen right now to Pierre Poilievre.
I think it was that she resigned rather than introduce a $62 billion deficit. I think she said the Liberals were trying to force her to introduce a deficit of $62 billion, and she said, this is irresponsible, it is out of control, and it will cause massive inflation. And of course, that deficit went ahead anyway, and now it's even bigger. She's probably trying to get out of town and as far away as possible before this disastrous November budget comes, and I don't blame her.
Pierre Poilievre from this afternoon. Now, also this afternoon, Freeland's 2 portfolios were handed over to 2 other ministers.
LeBlanc, do solemnly and sincerely promise and swear that I will truly and faithfully and to the best of my
That is Dominic LeBlanc, already the president of the King's Privy Council in Canada, Intergovernmental Affairs Minister, and the minister responsible for the Canada-U.S. trade relationship. Well, he now adds internal trade to his roster of duties. And the government House Leader, Steve McKinnon, well, he adds the transportation portfolio to his. Well, Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe is in Ottawa today, fresh off a trip to Beijing, where he spoke to Chinese leadership about tariffs imposed by Beijing on Canadian canola and agricultural products. Premier Moe spoke to the Prime Minister today about that trip and to share his thoughts about where this goes next and how the conversation went. We're happy to say Premier Moe is in studio today. Premier Moe, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Michael.
So you, as I said, just got back from Beijing, and when you landed at the airport in Regina, you struck this fairly positive note in what you were sharing with journalists, saying that Beijing is open to recalibrating, to reopening talks with Canada about trade. After meeting with Mark Carney just hours ago, are you still striking that positive note?
Yes, and we're appreciative we had the opportunity to bring together not only the Prime Minister, but the canola industry as a whole, to have a sit down and a discussion about what the path forward looks like. And I'm fairly bullish on the opportunity that we have to engage. And what I heard in my time in China, and Parliamentary Secretary Cody Blois would have heard the same, is that there is a willingness to look forward and to recalibrate this relationship in a pragmatic and strategic way that's beneficial for both countries. If we continue to look back, there's going to be all sorts of challenges in finding resolution. But if we do look forward, I think there is a path, hopefully, in sooner rather than later. So I would think you're going to see engagement now by the federal government at an increased level in the weeks and months ahead.
Okay, so further engagement, does that mean, for example, dropping the Canadian tariffs on Chinese EVs? Because when you look at what's happening to canola, for people who haven't been following very closely, the canola tariffs is a direct response to the EV tariffs that Canada applied to China. And then when it comes to other agricultural products, that is in response to tariffs against Chinese steel and aluminum. Are those going to be amended or dropped?
Yeah, there's irritants on both sides. We're concerned with the canola, the pulse crop irritant, the pork irritant, seafood. But the Chinese have some concerns around the EV tariffs that are there. And the way to find that constructive path forward is through dialogue and engagement. And so I would hope that you're going to see a number of Canadian ministers engaging with their counterparts, whether it be in China or other areas of the world, in the next number of weeks to have those conversations. And there's other countries that have found a path forward. Mexico, for example, has a different EV tariff rate than Canada and the U.S. has. The European Union has found a path forward in this discussion as well. And so I'll leave, that landing spot to the engagement that we have, but it isn't as simple as just reducing or removing the EV tariff, for example, because we must never forget that our largest trading partner is just to the south of us. It's the United States of America.
Mm-hmm. So a difficult balancing act, if you will. Although, when you look at these tariffs, obviously it's had a deep impact on the farmers in your province. What has it done to people in Saskatchewan? It
created this, great amount of uncertainty. And I think the broader, trade, market access, tariff discussion, whether it be with the United States of America, again, our largest customer, China, Saskatchewan's second largest customer, and I think largely Canada's second largest customer as well, or any of the other markets around the world where this market access conversation is front of mind and happening before our very eyes in very rapid fashion. It's creating this vast amount of uncertainty. And so the sooner that we're able to get to a much more stable place with those markets of interest, USA, China, and in Saskatchewan's case, we export to over 160 markets around the world. So a lot of work and runway to happen there. But in Canada's case, it's a large number as well. And so a lot of work to do in each specific market. Each market is approached a little bit differently. China is approached a little bit differently than the United States of America. And that work is happening by the federal government, and we're here to support it. It's for the betterment of not just the residents in Saskatchewan, but all Canadians. I
can imagine there are people that are watching this conversation, and ultimately for them the question is, okay, but when? And when you look at what's happening with the United States, the discussions with the U.S. has been going on 4 months without resolution. What type of timeline are we looking at for people who are, at this point, harvesting crops, really not knowing what to do with them?
I would hope for some stability, maybe not broad agreements, but some stability in that relationship with the United States sooner rather than later. And when it comes to China, I think we'd look for signals. Myself and Parliamentary Secretary Cody Blois on a mission there last week, that's a signal of interest. We had the reactivation of the JETSI, the Joint Economic Trade Commission. Vice Minister Lee from China attended in Canada to that commission after 7 years of not operating. That in itself is a signal. There are other signals I think that we'll look for in the the days, the weeks, and the months ahead that will ultimately find our way to a more constructive path forward when it comes to both the United States as well as China.
So between now and then, whenever this resolution happens, are there supports that Ottawa needs to step forward with? Are there supports that your government is looking at to give more stability to people in your province? There
was some supports, offered in principle last week, and I think the intent of that is appreciated. However, there's some industries in Canada, and I would say the canola industry would be one of them. $43 billion industry employing 200,000 Canadians. I don't know that we can afford to support that industry. And what that industry needs is market access sooner rather than later to both markets, the United States of America as well as China, Japan, Mexico, many other markets are of utter importance to the ag industry more broadly, including the agri-food, canola oil and meal industry. So we need market access. It has to be the priority, and I would again look to that engagement happening in the weeks and months ahead by the federal government. We're going to support that. And two is for signals, both from our side and from the country of China, as to bringing this conversation closer and finding a strategic path forward that's beneficial not just for Canadians but also beneficial for people that live in China.
But at this moment in time, feeling positive?
Feeling positive.
Okay. Premier Moe, always appreciate the time. Thank you for coming to studio today.
Thank you, Michael.
Well, time now for a look at what else happened in politics today.
I'm looking forward to very comprehensive discussions with the President. It was a great opportunity to get into depth on a wide range of issues. Thank you very much.
That is the Prime Minister from this morning, Mark Carney, announcing a trip to Mexico with a focus on broadening the bilateral relationship. The PM will be in Mexico City on Thursday and Friday, and he will meet with the Mexican President, Claudia Sheinbaum.
I'm looking forward to working with my colleagues across the aisle to honor the legacy of Sergei Magnitsky and continue to stand up and make sure Canada is not being used as a safe haven by corrupt foreign officials and gross human rights violators.
That's Conservative MP James Bazan, and today he did table a bill seeking to strengthen the Magnitsky Act. The law allows for restrictive measures, including sanctions, to be used against foreign nationals responsible for human rights abuses and corruption. Bazan's proposed changes to the law would require the government to update Parliament on its actions to protect human rights abroad and to brief parliamentarians on how sanctions are being applied. The bill would also ban family members of sanctioned individuals from entering Canada. And finally, Food Banks Canada is giving the government's poverty reduction efforts a D in its latest report card. The annual report says poverty and food insecurity in Canada is up almost 40% over the last 2 years. It also reports over a quarter of Canadian households struggled to afford food in 2025. The organization wants to see food insecurity cut in half by 2030 and is calling on all levels of government to adopt that goal. Once again, the Carney government says it will table its first budget on November the 4th. None too soon for opposition MPs and for Ottawa's parliamentary budget officer, who today told a committee he was uncertain whether the Carney government will stick to the fiscal anchors outlined in the last federal budget. Carney has backed a number of big-ticket items since coming to office, including billions for national projects announced last week, which Carney argues is needed to retool the Canadian economy in the face of Trump's trade policies. Well, with his thoughts on the Carney government's list of national projects, we're now joined by British Columbia's Minister for Jobs and Economic Development, Ravi Kahlon. Minister, good to see you again.
Good to see you. Thank you for having me.
Listen, you have already praised the Carney government's prioritization of 2 projects in your province. We're talking about LNG Canada's Phase 2, also the expansion of the Red Chris mine. But, you know, these projects, and I don't have to tell you, they were already off the ground in some form. So what exactly is the value of having these ventures referred to the National Projects Office?
Well, certainly for a Red Chris mine, it's helpful because there's a lot of smaller permits that need to be issued along the way. But a lot of the work on that project had already been done. It was just at the final moments of it moving forward. As far as LNG Canada 2, it's actually very important to have the federal government online because the final investment decision on that project hasn't been made. We've been working closely with the proponents. We've been working with First Nations partners on the ground. And to have the federal government come in and say, yes, this is of national significance, it not only gives the investors some comfort in the decision that they have to make, but we also hope that the federal government comes in and helps support that project in financial ways as well, so that we can get that across the line.
Mm-hmm. Now, you've noted the fact that 40% of the federal priority projects, at least in this initial list, are British Columbian. But I do wonder, as the impact of Donald Trump's trade policies hit the Canadian economy, how quickly will these projects deliver results? How effective will they actually be in, you know, creating economic growth and new markets for this country?
Well, we believe that BC will be the economic engine for the country. We have a lot of projects that are in the pipeline. We've got not only the mine proposal and the natural gas proposal, we've got a whole host of other projects that are potential down the pipeline. And that means jobs, you know, right away in construction phase, as well as employment that's steady all the way through. But more importantly, it's a strong signal that you're starting to see investments come to Canada, to come to British Columbia. You know, we just recently had Teck announce an extension of their project. There's a merger with Anglo American. They're moving their headquarters to British Columbia. So we're pleased to see that direction, and we know it's needed now more than ever. And I'll just add that the critical mineral projects that are in British Columbia that we're proposing to the federal government, such as, you know, germanium and other important critical minerals, also help us in the negotiations with the U.S. because they're going to need critical minerals. And that should be part of the negotiation discussions that are happening with them in the discussion of CUSMA overall.
Yeah, discussion of CUSMA. But in terms of jobs, do you see that? Do you see these investments creating jobs in the short term? You know, because the problems are very immediate for people right now.
Well, no doubt. And we see the challenge on the ground here as well. You know, unemployment is slightly moved up. We have young people that are struggling to find access to employment. And so the challenge is real. But these projects are vitally important, not only because they send a good signal, not only because it's a lot of dollars coming into the BC economy. You know, when a mine goes online in the north of BC, Metro Vancouver benefits because many of the suppliers that provide the goods for those mines are actually in the Lower Mainland. So, you know, obviously these investments are very important for us. We've got 18 projects that we have prioritized from the province's perspective. So there's a lot more for the federal government to consider. One of the ones that we're advancing is the North Coast transmission line, which will help electrify the north, create new economic opportunities, but also unlock a lot of future potential investments. So we're going to continue to press the federal government to consider more projects in British Columbia because there's no shortage of them.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And as you say, an electric line in the province itself. But, you know, as you know, a new oil pipeline did not make the initial list of national projects, but they were mentioned in the list of possible projects that will be released, you know, in the coming months. Is your government changing its mind at all, being moved on the advantage of actually investing in a pipeline? Because, as you know, the pressure from Alberta has not stopped on that.
Well, we believe at this point, first off, there's no proponent. But second, if you want to see a return and you want to see jobs being created right away, why not expand the capacity of the pipeline that we already have? that the taxpayers of Canada have paid for. When we spend billions of dollars on a pipeline that's running at 70% capacity, if you increase dredging, well, we can increase the capacity of that pipeline instantly. In fact, by 2027. And, you know, discussion of a pipeline is not going to be solved with the Prime Minister meeting the Premier of Alberta in a closed room meeting. They have to come to communities. They have to come talk to local First Nations. They have to come talk to the folks that are going to be impacted by these decisions. So, you know, I think a discussion of that is a long ways away. And what's more immediate and the greatest opportunity for us is the infrastructure that we have already built that we're underutilizing. And so we're hoping that's a part of the conversation. We're not against economic development. We actually have a lot of opportunities, but we want it to be thoughtful. We want it to be good use of taxpayer dollars. And we'll see where the discussions go from there.
Ravi Kahlon, Minister, always appreciate the time. Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I look forward to coming back.
And that is our program for this evening. Now, a quick note. Tomorrow will be another rate decision from the Bank of Canada. We'll be watching that very closely. Put together an economics panel to figure out what it actually means for the economic outlook of this country, rather. But for now, I'm Michael Serapio. For everyone here at CPAC, thank you for watching. We're back tomorrow evening. We'll see you again then.